welcome to Rock and Metal Invasion. My name is Steve. Coming up on the show today, I'm doing What is Hair Metal? Now, the idea for this show came from JC and his thread that he started, Intro to Hair Metal, and so I thought I'd just sort of break that down, change that just a little bit to what is hair metal. So for me, I'm not a big fan of the term hair metal, but as you will know if you've gone through my channel, I say hair metal quite a lot. So I totally understand and have no problem with using that term. But for me, as I've said in one of my previous episodes, it is not actually a musical genre. It could almost be maybe a way of describing the image of a band, perhaps. But usually bands that were called hair metal came out in the 80s to early 90s. And they played either hard rock or heavy metal. So basically, the musical genre for hair metal is either hard rock or heavy metal. Not counting thrash or speed metal. So if it gets heavier than heavy metal, then it's definitely not confused with hair metal. But often, you had bands that were hard rock or heavy metal in the 80s and early 90s, and they would then be called hair metal. So I'm going to break that down a little bit. So, well, what's hard rock and what's heavy metal? So, first up, this was a very successful album. This is Twisted Sister and Stay Hungry. For me, this is heavy metal. Now, I'm talking about not the band specifically, I'm talking about the album. Okay? So you could argue Love Is For Suckers by Twisted Sister is more of a hard rock album. But for me, Stay Hungry is a heavy metal album. Sabotage, Power of the Night, this is heavy metal. But both Twisted Sister and Sabotage have from time to time been called hair metal. Leather Wolf, the album Street Ready, that's heavy metal. This is all my opinion, of course. Nitro, OFR. This band and this album is a really good example. It's used a lot as sort of an example of hair metal, but this is actually heavy metal. Yes, the image might be hair metal. I mean, look at that. That's possibly the ultimate image of hair metal. But musically, I'm going to say it's heavy metal. Because everything's quite extreme there. Loud guitars, very loud vocals, yeah, that's OFR is the title of that album, and it's over the top as well. Riot, Thundersteel. I'm going to say that this is heavy metal. Let's look at the back. They look a little bit like they could be, well, they've got a little bit of a hair metal look, haven't they? Okay, but that is heavy metal. So, like I said, you can be hard rock or you could be heavy metal, but then you could be given the term, or you could be given the category of being a hair metal band. So all those bands, or those albums I've showed you, I'm going to consider that's all heavy metal. But a lot of those bands, not all of them, have at one time, by some people, been called hair metal. Or those albums even might have been called hair metal. Maybe they, on reflection, there's some hair metal elements there. Okay. Remember, what you've got to remember is, of course, in the 80s, hair metal as a term did not exist. Okay. I think, too, what has changed since then is what's the definition of hard rock and what's the definition of heavy metal. So I think now when we look back on it, we can maybe now say some bands are hard rock and some bands are heavy metal. Probably back in the 80s, hard rock was less of a thing and you were just heavy metal. And I'll kind of give an example of that very soon. Now, some bands that are well-known bands that I think when people write about these albums now or well after they got released, have sometimes said that these were hair metal albums. So Dio, Sacred Heart. To me, this is heavy metal. I think the reason perhaps that album and some of these other quite well-known albums were given the term hair metal is because maybe they changed their image a little bit, so it became a bit more of an image. Also, maybe they had some keyboards. They started putting a bit more keyboards in. Example that may be Ozzy Osbourne, The Ultimate Sin. For me, this is heavy metal. but Ozzy's image did change a little bit. He did sort of have a bit more of a glam image. He's always had some keyboards in there, but that has been called that's been called sometimes Ozzy's hair metal album. And this one from Judas Priest, Turbo, this has also been called Judas Priest's hair metal album. For me, it's heavy metal. Same with Ozzy Osbourne, Ultimate Sin, that's heavy metal. But what is difficult is going, well, if you're saying that that's heavy metal, when does it become hard rock? And to be honest, that is a tricky one. That is a really tricky one. And I personally wouldn't be really fussy about it and go, if someone said to me, Judas Priest is hard rock, I wouldn't argue with them about it. Okay. Likewise, it goes the other way. This is probably the more common thing that might happen. Someone might say Motley Crue, Shout at the Devil, is heavy metal. I totally wouldn't argue with you. Okay. I'm going to say it's hard rock, but it's a real close call for me on this one. This is a tough one. Imagery, it's got a bit of sort of quite a heavy metal kind of imagery with, the sort of satanic imagery, and this is 1983. So definitely, again, this is a really good example of back in the day in 1983, without a doubt, this was considered heavy metal. I'm going to say now perhaps it's the category of hard rock, but it's a tricky one. Dokken was an interesting band because they were pretty heavy. They are definitely put in the hair metal category. They are just a hard rock band. They did dabble with the image a little bit, but image wasn't big on this album. This is quite a heavy album, I think, for an album that's often given the hair metal term. It's pretty close to heavy metal because it's got some pretty heavy riffs on there. There's not a lot of ballads, but I'm going to say it's hard rock. This one's an interesting one because it came out in 1978, and I'm sure in 1978 this was definitely considered heavy metal. But I'm going to say now it's hard rock, and if you look at all the albums that I think Van Halen have put out, I'm going to say that they're a hard rock band and they put out hard rock albums. But if you asked me in 1978, I probably would have said this is heavy metal, or even in the early 80s, it was heavy metal. Bon Jovi, 7,800 degrees Fahrenheit. This was called hair metal, but this is just a hard rock band. Yes, they do have an image, but they're a hard rock band. Now these guys, they didn't really have an image, but they were definitely called hair metal, and they just are a really good hard rock band. Oh, yeah, they've got long hair, but they didn't really play up their image too much. The lyrics were, there was some hair, what you might call typical hair metal lyrics at times, but not as obvious as other bands. Quite a respected band. These guys, definitely got nothing to be ashamed of from the stuff they put out in the 80s and early 90s. So I'm calling this hard rock. This one's an interesting one because I'm calling it hard rock, but this is Metal Health. Even the title of the album's got the word metal in it. So again, I think if you go back when this was released in 1983, this is probably more accurately termed heavy metal. So I guess it depends if you want to say retrospectively, it's hard rock, but back in the day, it's probably heavy metal. Okay? Even they are calling themselves heavy metal. The album's got Metal Health. It's got metal in the title. Of course, a lot of these hair metal bands didn't even want to be called heavy metal. They were like, oh, we're not a metal band. No, we're just a rock and roll band. We're a rock band. And so that's kind of interesting. But yeah. And also, too, with a lot of these bands, they were actually heavy metal. And then maybe, they get a contract with the record company. And they say, hey, we're just going to maybe bring some songwriters in just to help you out. Maybe just change your image a little bit. And then they go less heavy metal and more hard rock. And then, of course, they get given the hair metal tag. So, I guess what I'm saying is hair metal, you're either a heavy metal band or a hard rock band. Hair metal is not a musical genre, okay, but it could be a way of describing the image. But I have no problem with using hair metal as a term. No problem at all. Because I know what you're talking about when you say that. Now, you could also then break down these genres a little bit more if you really wanted to. So another term that sometimes was used, even back in the day, I guess, was like sleaze metal or sleazy hard rock or street metal. It's sort of known perhaps now a little bit more as dirty hair metal. And a good example of that is Faster Pussycat, and this is Wake Me When It's Over. There was an interview with the guitarist from Faster Pussycat back in the day, and he said, I really hate it when people call us glam. And then the interviewer said to him, okay, well then how would you describe your music? And he goes, glam, and laughs. So I mean, even then, they just really wanted to be a rock band, but they could see that they had some glam elements. So, but I'm not. The thing is, it's funny that he said that was as his answer, because they're not. If you're going to give them a subgenre, they're not glam metal. For me, they're not glam metal because I'm going to give you better examples, I think, of glam metal. But definitely, like a term that's used at the moment, or quite recently, I've heard Martin Popoff use this term, and I kind of like it. Dirty street metal. Dirty hair metal. Dirty hair metal. Because it's like they're not. They don't. They're not really making actually a big effort with the way they look. It looks like they just rolled out of bed. Some of them. Sometimes they're smoking a cigarette. It's not the glam look that I'm going to show you some examples of soon. So I think image-wise it's different, and musically it's that sort of more rock and roll, old sort of Rolling Stones inspired kind of hard rock. And another example, LA Guns, Hollywood Vampires. They're very similar to Faster Pussycat. Another one that I think fits this sort of genre of sleaze metal or dirty hair metal or street metal, Little Caesar. That's the image there. So you can break down, probably you're breaking down those hard rock bands. If they're not just straight hard rock, sometimes you can break them down into other categories. So breaking that down then to what you might call, I don't really like to use the term hair metal because I'm trying to break down hard rock. So I'm breaking down hard rock into, let's just call it sleaze metal maybe, or something, or street metal, or something like that. It's definitely not glam metal, even though I think sometimes those bands were then called glam metal. I think you've got to reserve glam metal for bands like Pretty Boy Floyd. Okay, so they took that sort of glam rock sound of the 70s, maybe made it a little bit more metal, and image got turned up quite a bit, as you can see. And of course, probably the ultimate and most well-known glam metal band, Poison, what the Cat Dragged in. And they toned their image down, of course, on subsequent albums, but the sound was definitely very glam as well, glam rock inspired, definitely with the image. And you could also break down some of those hair metal bands that were called hair metal. But you could actually say, well, like I'm saying, that they're actually hard rock bands. You could break that sound down even more. There was sort of a blues metal kind of sound that also came in to some of these bands that are now known as hair metal. So one of the more well-known blues metal bands was Cinderella, and Long Cold Winter definitely got a lot more bluesy, or the blues influence started to come in on this album. This is not their first album. Their first album was probably a little bit closer to the heavy metal, AC/DC inspired. This one, blues metal. And then blues metal became quite popular. There were quite a few bands coming out that were inspired by the blues, but had some metal influences in there as well. Probably the best was Badlands. Alright, so there's a number of bands that have in the past been called hair metal, or are called hair metal, and like I said, no problem with that. But actually, a lot of them all sound quite different. Okay, so quite a lot of difference between, there's a big difference, I think, between Riot, who have been called hair metal, and Nitro, and Badlands, and Poison, and also LA Guns. All those albums sound quite different to each other. Yes, there's some similarities, so sure, put them under the hard rock, heavy metal umbrella, but, you know, just to say that they're all hair metal is a little bit simplistic, and like I say, isn't really a musical genre. You know, if someone was told that, you know, Riot is hair metal, they got the album, they thought, oh yeah, wow, I think I really like hair metal. I'm going to go and get another album that's also being called hair metal. So they really like Riot, and then they go and get Poison. Look what the cat dragged in. They might like it, but it's quite different, isn't it? So anyway, that's a little bit of an explanation. And follow up on the thread from JC, intro to hair metal, and I'm just going to call it what is hair metal. All right, thanks for watching. Catch you later.